Welcome to the Honest Business Podcast. This is the show for ambitious, value-driven business owners who are actively building a business that works for them. Hi, I'm May James, and I'm here to make scaling your business easier and more rewarding than ever. Each week, we will dive into simple, sustainable strategy and pragmatic leadership discussion to support you as you take imperfect action on your entrepreneurial journey. If you want to stay ahead, exceed your growth goals, and have a purposeful, thriving business, then keep on listening. Hello and welcome back to the Honest Business Podcast. If you have not listened to part 1 of this episode, please go back to last week's, and I'd recommend you listen to that one first and come back to this one. We are talking about how to enjoy the journey when you want to be further ahead than you are in your business growth and how to manage slow growth. What an episode last week was, and this week we're really building on that, and there's a lot more to get through, so buckle up, grab a drink, a snack, I don't know, get something, get cozy. We are heading into autumn, which is so nice and makes me so excited. It's my favourite time of year, to anyone who doesn't know. Summer is not the one for me. I love autumn, winter. It's very much my favourite time of year. And so I hope you are having a really lovely day if you're listening to this. I hope you're having a great time doing whatever you're doing, because I know many of you multitask while listening. And yeah, feel free to come and chat with me over on Instagram. I'm at may.james_. I'd love to have a chat with you about this episode, or even just about business in general. If you want to have a chinwag, get to know me if I don't know you already. And if I do, or you're a lovely client, hello, welcome. Let's dive in. And I left you with the idea of talking about sales last week. So we're going to talk about sales. So that's where we're going to start from. So when you are experiencing slow growth, the one thing I do want to say, and again, this is why it's really important you listen to last week's episode, because I'm not going to caveat the same things I caveated in the last one. So please just go and listen to it, and then don't get annoyed with me if I start saying stuff and you're like, it sounds a bit intense. Please just listen to the other episode. So if you are experiencing slow growth, the one thing you do need to look at is it a sales problem? Do you have a sales problem in your business? Because that might be why you're experiencing slow growth. And I think this is the difference between, right? There's a difference between having slow growth because it's part of your journey and it's just many factors that mean that that's where it's going. Or is it, do you have a sales problem? Because I would actually say that it's hard to put a number on it because I don't know the infinitives of everybody's business, right? But I would say, if I had to guess, around 80%, 75-80% of people who are in this situation, if you're listening where like you feel like you want to be further ahead and you're managing slow growth and it's not kind of working at the speed you want it to, it is because there's key things in your business that need sorting out. There's key problems, there's key issues, there's things that could be tweaked, there's things that could be improved. So I do really believe for 80% of people that you do have a sales problem on some level, or your marketing or something is not going right in terms of your funnel and attracting customers and learning how to convert customers. There's then is another 20% of people where it's part of the journey and it comes into the discussion that we had last week. So that is, the podcast for that part. But really thinking about, do you have a sales problem? And it's okay if you do. And what I mean by that is, it might be that you're consistently making sales, or you can make consistent sales, but it might not be fitting with where the goals of the business are going. So if you've already got a really decent sized business, you might still have a sales problem in relation to the goals that you're going after, and that is okay. If that is you, you need to sort that out, because that's going to really hold you back and be a real sticking point, because there's a difference between all the stuff we talked about in part 1 and just waiting and understanding that building foundations and doing these things and etc. But if you've actually got a sales problem, that is not going to miraculously change overnight, and so you really need to address that. And that is something that will be a real drain on your resources, because if you are doing 200 grand a year and you want to get to 600 grand a year, the amount of money that you will be hemorrhaging from having sales problems is huge. Hemorrhaging in the sense of the money you're not actually getting in the first place, but that's not what I mainly mean. What I mean is the time and the money and the effort that has been wasted on trying to get sales, and the money that is lost through people doing various things and you employing various people. So you do need to sort out that, and if that is a problem for you, come and talk to me and we can create something, a plan of action around that, and I can create a sales strategy for you that makes complete sense and is bespoke to you and your business and will work when followed for you and your specific industry and market, because that can be a key thing. And that's one of the main, it's not the main thing, but it's one of the biggest things that I can do with clients, especially if you are in this situation, is sort that out, because that is a real key one. the other thing that links to that is you need to really sort your messaging out. Most people who are a bit stuck or feel like their growth's quite stagnant or they're kind of slow growth and they want to be further ahead and they want to reach a certain goal, often it's because the messaging is not right, it doesn't make sense, or it makes sense to the business you've already achieved, but it doesn't make sense to the business you want to achieve. The messaging can be too much aimed to your competitors and not enough to actually your target audience. Sometimes it's that your target audience needs to change in order to reach the goal you want to get to, and then for that hasn't been made clear and your messaging still talking to one set of people. The other thing is your messaging might be speaking to too many different types of people, and therefore you've ended up with this like mixture of different people, and that can be hard. I think it's just really about getting sorted on your messaging and key messaging points, and then building a messaging strategy around that. And so for some people that will be really holding you back, and that can be simple tweaks where I can be like, okay, change this, do that, don't say this, say this, and we go on that journey together. But that can really be a key one, and I'd argue that that is one of the biggest ones. Like, one of the biggest reasons people have slow growth is because what they think they're saying is not the same as what someone else is hearing, and so that can get really difficult for people to like navigate in their head. And so I understand that it's hard. It's something that I've definitely struggled with over the years, and I still check in with all the time, especially with like team and with other advisors and mentors, that to check that that's really on point, because it is something that's really hard. It's difficult to do, especially for service-based business. The less kind of tangible thing to speak about next is about comparison. Is comparison killing your business? Because that really, really comes into play at this point. So sometimes you will then self-sabotage. So if you get the sales sorted out, you've got your messaging on point, then what happens sometimes is, weirdly, people then start self-sabotaging through comparisons. They then start comparing to everyone, and it can be someone doing the same as them. So it's like someone in the same industry and market doing the same kind of money as them, and then they all of a sudden just get freaked out by them and then start like literally causing havoc in their own business. And I've spoken about this before in other episodes to do with other areas of the business. You know, when we've talked, I think, before about reaching your goals, and that can happen, and there's other areas. But one of the ways it can show up is when you want to be further ahead, but then you also like do the reverse thing, and it's like an anti-growth strategy, I call it, where people just go a bit haywire and they just go mad in terms of like the things that they choose to like do. That just can get very messed up very quickly, and it's okay if you do that, because you need to highlight and understand why you're doing it. But the comparison piece is really key, that you kind of try and get a hold on, because you don't need to compare yourself to everyone, and it's okay if you do, but it's how you respond with the comparison that is the real kind of kicker there. Next up, the question I often ask people, which is a really simple question. It's 4 words, but I think it's a really important one, is what is the rush? What is the rush? That's a really key question here, okay? What's the rush? And I want you to write that down now on a piece of paper. Please get a piece of paper out or on your phone, on your notes, and write down, what is the rush? And insert your name. Like, what is the rush, May? And think about that. Because I think sometimes we're chasing after things that we don't actually know why we're chasing after them. And we're not sure why it is such a rush. It just seems to be. So what is the rush? Get really clear on that. Like, I don't know, what is the rush? Because that can often bring up some interesting answers, and some of the answers you write down for that will lead you back to part 1. So if, there'll be some interesting things come up of like, what is the rush? Well, the rush is that I need to have the money in order to be able to do this thing. And then go deeper into that and say, well, why? And I like really using the questioning technique of why and saying, okay, well, why is that then? And why is that? And why is that? And I know they can get quite boring and annoying, but if you do that exercise, it's very interesting to see what comes up, because after you've done why for about 3 or 4 times, you'll actually probably get to the true source of what's going on. And that can be a really interesting conversation. Linked to the comparison piece and to understanding speed and accepting slow growth, the next point, and is a practical one, is curate who you're following and who you're absorbing information from, who you're getting supported by, who you're viewing as a mentor, who you're putting on a podium and a pedestal. Get really clear on who do you want to do? Like, how do you want people to make you feel? And then curate your space for that. And I think this is one of the biggest things you can do. You hear that a lot, but actually implementing that and putting it into practice, you can really help yourself. So like, think about, does this person help me? Does this person make me feel good? And for me, I think it's more so about feeling. Like, even if they provide you with loads of educational content that you think, yeah, this is really helpful, if they make you feel like crap, then like maybe consider just weaning off a bit and just unfollowing, maybe even just for a week or two, and see how you feel, because I think that can get very absorbent. And I think a lot of people, sometimes I've done this exercise with people where I've said, right, you're gonna have to just completely stop consuming. Like, I don't tend to go extreme a lot because I don't think it's good, but for some clients I have had to say before, right, we're just gonna stop following everyone, unfollow everyone in your area, everyone in your niche, everyone who you feel like is doing something similar to what you do, everyone who even has a business for some people. And they've done 3 weeks of that and they're like, I don't want to say a different person, but like, that sounds a bit exaggerated, but like, that is kind of what happens. Like, people are like, oh my goodness, I can actually think for myself again. I can create content from a place of actually knowing what I want to create content about. Like, people really, really like change their mindset and change how they're approaching their whole business just from stopping this constant information overload that comes from being on social. So really think about that. Like, I think that's a very important conversation of like, oh yeah, like, why am I following this person and what do they do? The other thing is like, who are you being supported by? That's another key one. Are you being supported by someone who is kind of like purposely activating things inside of you that really don't need to be? That can be a real like dagger in the heart situation, but can be something you need to think about of like, yeah, like, why do I feel like this? And I'm just going to go deep here, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I'm going to anyway. I'll try and keep it as tame as possible. One of those ways might be, does someone have oh God, can I say this? Yes, I can. Right, let's try and make this as less judgy as I can possibly make it. It's going to sound judgy, isn't it? Oh no. My podcast editor is going to be laughing listening to this. I'm just going to be like, are we keeping this in or we're not? Keep it in. The people who are loyal listeners will enjoy it. A great example, and this is something that I've had because clients have come to me from this place. And I am not saying that people who do this are bad people. I'm not saying they're not good. I'm not saying that the stuff they share is not good. They are building a business that works for them and using a business model that works for them. That is fine. But you might be being supported by someone who, for example, maybe runs a really short program. So it might be that you join them for a 4-week stint, and that's great. And I'm not against them, because sometimes we need that. We need a short hit and we don't need a long thing, right? Great. But what is the key differentiator here is, within that 4-week thing, is it then a priming tool? Is it then a positioning technique to get you to then need/want/be obsessed by/have to buy the next thing that they have? As in, the next, like, big thing. As in, the first 4 weeks was 500 quid, but now the year-long thing is 12 grand, 20 grand, 6 grand. Like, what does that mean? And again, I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm just saying that this is part of this marketing that we've come to switch against. And it's hard because it's attractive, right? People want to buy short things and get massive results, and they can do. But then what also happens is, it's then also like a great time for certain business owners to then use that as a real interesting technique and tool to attract more people into their business. And that is fine, but then it can also sway another way. And I will be open and honest and tell you that some of these programs, courses, things are created on that. It's on this constant adrenaline hike. And how many people have you, like, let's just go with this, right? Have you been on something that's like a 4-week thing, a 6-week thing, where you've on like a real high, but then when it ends, there's this massive low and this massive crash? And that's not the fault of the person doing it necessarily, right? There's 25 million different reasons as to why that might be. But one of the things is, you can be on this real like high, and then this real low, and that's purposely created because they know that then that's going to help you to purchase a next thing from them. And then it becomes this all very bizarre and cumbersome thing. Now, I'm not saying everyone who has a 4-week program is doing that. I'm not saying that at all. Please don't take that the wrong way. But what I am saying is that is a key way that you're feeling around wanting to be further ahead, having slow growth, not enjoying the process will be triggered because you're being pushed into belief. You're being surrounded by people who are also feeling somewhat similar, right? And then the marketing of the person who's telling you, let's go again, let's go in this thing, is using all of the things that you're feeling right now and while you're listening to this episode potentially in their messaging. And so it's not your fault. And sometimes it's not their fault. Sometimes people are doing this, by the way, they don't even have a clue. So if you listen to this thinking, oh God, I've definitely done this and I really didn't mean for it to be that, that's okay. This whole conversation that I have on podcasts, the reason I'm so open about it is because I want people to understand from all aspects. People do things in the business they don't realise. Most people don't do this on purpose. They do it because it's secondhand information of someone else who they've been coached by, who the person who's coached it in the first place doesn't also know that this is the thing. And we end up with this whole swathes of people and communities who are riled up in all sorts of random ways. And what this can look like is that in 6 months' time or a year's time or 2 years' time, people come out and they're like, I was so miserable, I was so horrendous. And they have these like real massive long stories about how horrendous it was, even though on their social it was like the most amazing thing ever and they made all this money. Again, not saying that's everyone, I'm just saying that does come into play and it is some people. So coming back to the point of curating who you're following / who you are being supported by, that is something I'm talking about. That on surface level might seem like, well, okay, may I get that? But what I'm hoping is the examples that I share help you go deeper to think, yeah, what does that mean for me? Because like, for instance, a lot of my containers where people want to work on a coaching / consultant / advisory situation is a long container. It's either 6 months or 12 months. I'm not saying I'd never do a short like thing we could do potentially, but right now it isn't. I obviously have CEO Strategy Day, which is a 1 month container, and that's strategy. That's the whole point of it. So it's not necessarily about the growth, although that does happen. Or I have like an intensive, which again is strategy heavy. It's not about going into this whole like journey of an entrepreneur. But if it's something where like I need people over a long period of time to focus, then I purposely create things that are longer term, as in 6-12 months, because I want to get people into being comfortable, into understanding that this is a long-term thing. It's a long-term commitment. And it's then lower on people's nervous systems because I don't have to pack in like massive amounts of information or make them feel like this is this like whirlwind adventure where they only get 4 weeks and then it's gone and then that's it. I much prefer providing longer-term things for people because that ultimately is what's going to lead to them having this integrated system in their business versus this flash in the pan. Again, not saying that short programs don't work. I obviously have offerings and services that are short myself in terms of like strategy consulting and building strategy and stuff. Like I'm not against them. I'm just saying that this is so nuanced and this is where this conversation always comes back to, doesn't it? But really getting clear on who are you being supported by and why. And my next point to this, which might sound contradictory after this conversation, is that if you want to learn to enjoy the journey of wanting to be further ahead than you are and managing slow growth, one of the things, if you have the resources available, I'd really suggest doing is hiring support, as in a coach, consultant, advisor, strategist, mentor, whatever you want to call them. That can really help you. But obviously, from the last conversation, it needs to be the right person or the right group of people. And for that reason, I think it's really key to kind of look at what do you need and what do you not want and what does cause all the things we talked about in part 1, what does activate that for you, because you need to look for someone that isn't doing that. So yeah, having, I factually know, well, I can't say factually because I suppose we don't have a proven study, but figuratively is what I mean, is that some of the businesses that I support in the more beginning stages of where they were, they would not be here still to this day if they didn't have support beyond themselves. They just wouldn't. And I'm also a product of that. I would not have stuck out And I wouldn't have got to where I'm at without support. I just wouldn't have. It's just so bloody hard. It's really, really shit. It's really hard sometimes. And, sometimes there's problems that you just think, what? What do we do? And so for me, I have to always mention that about getting support, because it is so, so important and so key. And it's different from your network. I think that's another key thing. Like, it's different from just having a network or like having people around you, like community, like that. Them two things are both really, really important, but they are different. So yeah, that's an important point. So moving on, next point is thinking about growth mindset. So when you are in this, like, I want to be further along, I don't know what I'm doing, think about, are you in a growth mindset? Are you in a closed mindset? Are you actually progressing as an individual? Are you learning every day? Are you growing? Most people who feel a bit flat and frustrated often are not learning every day. If you continue to learn, you will find new solutions to your problems. Whether or not they work for your specific business is somewhat irrelevant. It's about this constant challenging of your brain and actually giving your brain solutions and finding problems and finding answers to your challenges. That will breed a hell of a lot of self-belief inside of you, and that can really shift a lot of things in your business day to day. So don't overlook the fact of, like, how are you actually supporting your growth, your personal growth, on a consistent basis? Are you reading? Are you doing a course? Like, what is it that you're learning? Are you listening to podcasts? Like, this is I'd argue, like, listening to the Honest Business podcast is a great option to continue your learning, because I hope that I can bring you conversation that does challenge you or does make you think or does kind of, bring up new ideas for you. And a lot of the time the stuff I talk about, it's not groundbreaking stuff that you've never heard before. It's about hearing it in a way that allows you to then go and use it or do something with it. And so really think about, how do you feed your mind on a daily basis? And is that in a growth aligned mindset, or is it in a really contractive, negative, stagnant one? That's an important kind of a capsule thing to think about, because it encompasses a lot, but it also really does make a big difference. And leading on to that is, you have to try and condition your brain into really thinking long term. In the last episode, we talked about hours and doing your 10,000 hours and your expertise, and I'd really link that back to that in terms of think about switching from this, my output today means X result tomorrow, or X result next month, or X result in 6 months, and instead think about, what does this cumulative effect mean? What does this compounding of activity mean for the business in 10 years? And I know that is hard. I know it's not easy, but if you can start really getting that nailed down, really important, because it's going to help you feel really aligned to where you're going, and stop with this idea that it's like today's worth is built on yesterday's win. Today's worth is not built on yesterday's win. Today's worth is built on 10-year you, in my opinion. And that is the switch to make. And that's hard because you don't know what the future holds, right? You don't know what challenges you're going to overcome. But the fact you're betting on yourself in advance tells me that you will do it. And that is so, so key. Important beyond belief to get your long-term thinking switched on, to get delayed gratification as a constant in your life, to find other ways to feed you serotonin, to give you a dopamine hit. That is all stuff that you're going to have to try and find things outside of searching for success, searching for business growth, being the best person on Instagram, because that ain't going to cut it, and it's not going to work for you long term. It doesn't. Because even the people who have these huge, massive growth and they have these amazing times, they go through growth cycles. And we're seeing it right now. We have seen in the last 2 years the 5-year growth cycle that a lot of businesses will go through who had really great growth and did do amazing things. A lot of people don't exist anymore, or they exist on such a smaller level compared to what they were. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying that that's bad. I'm just saying that the people you are using your self-worth around and basing it on from other people won't have that same level of success, in quotes, that you think they have in 5 years or 10 years time. They will if they stay motivated to their goals and they have a real clear set of, well, that's a whole other conversation, right? There's a whole other thing of like how they can be, but many of them, a high majority, will not. And again, that's okay. But don't base your life in your next 10 years on what someone else is doing, because that just doesn't make sense. Now, let's just breathe and have a moment. So if you can hear my bones clicking, I am hypermobile and click all the time without trying to. That was my wrist, I think. Have a breather. Have a drink. Let's have a chill. I feel like I've had a long discussion with you there. It's good. We're not even at the end yet. We've still got a bit to go. So stick in with me. And I hope this episode's kind of given you things to review and mull over in your head. So, this is a biggie, the next one. I need you to make sure that your goals are actually realistic. And this can be a bit weird, right? Because often I'm saying, make bigger goals, be bigger, think bigger, etc., right? Often our vision can be bigger. Like, the vision we have for ourselves can be bigger than what we have it as. But often the goals is where it gets really bizarre and rocky. And the goals can be the bit where it's not aligned. And that's not anyone's fault. It's just if you don't work with goals all the time and you're not someone who sees goals being reached and knows the timescales and the time collapses that can happen, it's hard to put a time limit on things. And so what I mean by that is people really overestimate what they can do in a year. Like in a 12-month period, people really overestimate that. They think they can change the world. But then what weird thing happens is they underestimate what can happen in a 5-year period, or most certainly a 10-year period. But a 5-year period is where most people can kind of manage to kind of look somewhat to. And people really underestimate what they're going to achieve in that point. But because if you manage to get yourself wired up enough on your growth mindset, on all of your good mindset stuff, you're getting yourself really where you need to be, if you can manage to stick out a year and actually commit to a goal for a year, which bear in mind most people can't, but if you can, amazing. And because you're listening to this podcast, you probably are. Like, you are someone who's a high achiever, who's doing things, who's making stuff happen. If you can commit to something for a year, you might not hit the goal in a year. And what happens is you just then fall off the wagon and you're like, fuck this, like, I've had enough, I can't be bothered, this is just it hasn't worked, etc., etc. Often the goal is too big for a year, but you can do way more than the goal in 5 years, and you can create this magical life that you couldn't have even dreamed of in 5 years. But it's all about that setting. So when people say to me, they come and I help people goal set, some people think like, that just sounds quite basic, like how hard can that be? But to have someone who can tell you like, that's probably a realistic goal, this is a stretch goal. And don't get me wrong, clients hit the stretch goals. Clients are like making shit happen. But I prefer it to come from a more realistic perspective, because I know longer term, over a 5-year period, that is going to lead to a better result for a business overall than being detrimental to damaging someone and setting them a really big stretch goal. Then that's really key. So that's why I'm a huge advocate for stretch goals and base goals and other goals, and help people set goals across businesses in different departments, because it's not as easy as just saying like, we're going to make X amount of money, or we're going to feature in this publication. Like, that is not enough, and it's not enough anymore, and it's also not enough for your team. And so learning to set goals that are realistic is really important. And when I say realistic, it's not about like being boring. It's not about setting goals that just aren't fun. That's not what I mean. It's just about making sure that your 5-year and your 10-year growth plan and vision is at the same speed and in alignment with what your 1 year is, or moving your 1 year to a 2 year if that actually is the bit that needs to happen. And that's really key for then enjoying the journey, because if not, you go through 12-month periods of real lows and real highs versus some people who are doing this on like a weekly basis. So it's all similar, right? It all duplicates. Like, a lot of the behavior I see from CEOs is very similar to those of people who are just starting a business. It's just the timescales are different because the gratification has been prolonged and they've managed to get their heads around that part. And this is why I'm saying, like, your journey, your leadership, your business ownership is a journey. It becomes the journey, and you've got to fall in love with the journey, because if you don't, it's going to be a fucking really hard time. And it will be a hard time anyway, but it makes it really impossible. So really think about, okay, what do I want to achieve in 5 years? And then finding a way to break it down into 5 years versus like the 1 year goal being so extremely huge that you might not be able to hit it. When we talk about slow growth in business, we have been conditioned now to believe that slow growth isn't good. I want to change that, and I want to champion the fact that slow growth is amazing and it can be fantastic for business, and it is so sustainable. Like, it can be way more sustainable than fast blow up businesses. And we see this all the time, right? There's so many pieces of evidence that show us that slow growth is good. And, I chose to build May James, this business, as quite a slow... it's really hard, right? Because slow growth means different things to different people. It's hard to... That's why at the beginning I didn't actually try and define that, because I was like, yeah, this is really hard to... It's really hard to kind of set a definition because everyone's opinion is different. But when I'm using this example of myself and the business that is May James, for some people you'll say, well, that's grown really fast, and it has, compared to, I suppose, compared to the statistics and the percents of however many people businesses fail and yada yada yada, yeah, it has done really well and it's gone fast. But compared to the industry I reside in and the people who do what I do, or say they do what I do, it's very slow in comparison to some people. Now, for me, that was all intentional. Like, I set out a real clear plan of like, this is what I want to happen, this is how long it's going to take me, this is what I don't want to happen. And some people will say I'm stupid, some people will say I'm stupid, I'm silly, I'm far too conservative, and that's okay. Like, that's fine. That's totally cool, because everyone's allowed their own opinion, and that's why we have individual businesses, and that's why we have businesses for different purposes. But for me, it was like, I just wanted to create something that was so amazing and was really solid. And again, I wasn't aiming to be the best in the world, because I don't know what the best in the world is. We can't find that. So even setting that goal was like that wasn't the goal, because like, why would it be? We don't even know. Who can say what the best in the world is? But I had a real strong sense in my head of like what the brand wanted to be, and the brand came later. The biggest thing for me was like what I wanted the service to be and what I wanted the results to be. That has always been clear from like day one. It's evolved in terms of the services, but in terms of the vision was clear. The brand then came in, and it's still stuff that we work on today. Obviously, it's constantly changing, it's constantly improving. It probably changes more than it needs to, but that's just because I'm really hungry to constantly be moving with things and not being stagnant and not like just waiting to die of a death of like boringness, if that makes sense. But I chose slow growth as kind of a pitchfork of like, I'm up for it. Why not? Because what's wrong with it? There's nothing wrong with it. Don't get me wrong. Have I had to really bite my tongue and not say things a lot of the time? Yeah. I could have said them, but I just don't think it makes sense, because I don't need to talk to, because of the businesses I work with. Like, I don't work with businesses who do what I do. I help some of them, and they are clients, but my clients are across industries and sectors. There's no point in me having like conversations to my industry, because I'm not selling 100% to my industry. I'm selling like, that might be like 25%. I don't know. I don't even know actually how many it is, but that to me hasn't made sense, right? So people are attracted to work with me who've seen how I approach business, and they're like, cool, I want to come and work with you because I like that. And that's how, that they appreciate that. But I just want to say on this podcast, like, it's okay for slow growth. It's okay to not need to be this like wild size business. And also, I suppose some people find it hard because they'll say, well, you're saying that, but you didn't grow slow. And I suppose in terms of from a money perspective, maybe not. But I've been through a stabilization phase. There's a lot happened in my life. Like, we've been through a lot of different things in the last few years. And I think it's just all about what you are going to enjoy. And like, I just opted to enjoy this whole process and this journey. And, we're gearing up now. We have been for a few months to do some other stuff, which is exciting. But none of it, for me, like, the goal is never on my yearly goals every year is like, get to this thing and it has to be this, it has to be that. Because like, that to me is just not the vibe. It's like, for me, it's just about, there's so much more to it than that. And there's so much more for me to delve into. And a lot of it's about feeling, and a lot of it's about the people, the type of people we work with. And that's like more success metric to me. the standard that we operate at, the team that we cultivate. Like, a lot of the things for me comes down to, how do people feel? How do I feel? How do team feel? How do customers feel? How does the business feel? That's really important. And I'm not saying you should be that. I'm just saying do whatever you want to do. But I want to mention that here to say it's okay to grow slow. It's okay to build a business really sustainably. For me, I'm looking at like 10, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years in advance. So like, I don't really care what happens in the next like 3 months or 6 months. And that sounds awful. I care about clients. I care about the people I work with. I care about the work we do on a day-to-day basis. But what I mean is, I don't care about at the end of the year being able to say, we've done X amount in revenue. Like, that just doesn't faze me, because I'm like, okay, cool. For me, it's like, this is all building part of a story for 20, 30, 40 years time. And that's exciting to me. And what really makes me happy is that I can be that story without having to say, for the first 5-10 years, it was an absolute shit show and we didn't have a clue what we were doing. Because that's not me, right? That's not how I work. It's not how I run. That's not how this whole thing works. I like the idea that in however many years' time I can say, yeah, I build it from the ground, from day one, from a clear understanding of this is what we're going to achieve, and we stuck with it. And that makes me very happy. And I'm not saying that has to be you. Like, I'm really not. Please do not feel like I'm telling you what you should be doing. I'm just saying that that is how I have chosen to go about this, because of me building this for a long, long time. But you have to remember that everyone's on a different journey. I see this, like, I see May James as a business and a brand being here for ages and ages and ages in some capacity. Some people are building a coaching business, a mentoring business, an online business, service-based business, a done-for-you business, whatever, and they only want to be in it for 3 or 4 or 5 years. And that's totally cool. That's fine. You're allowed to be, right? And in that 5 years, they want to go and make 20 million quid, set themselves up for life, be able to invest it, and have a really good time. There's nothing wrong with that. You can do that if you would like to. And you're not a bad person. You're not wrong. That's just totally what you're allowed to do. And so thinking about this and thinking about what is the business that you want to build is really, really important. And remembering that none of us know the answer. So you can always change your mind, right? You don't have to stick with it forever. You don't have to say, like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life and that's it. No, of course not. Nobody knows. But we can set intention and we can set what we think may happen. Finally, we're on the final point. I hope you're still with me. The final point I wanted to talk about in terms of how to enjoy the journey when you want to be further ahead than you are and how you manage slow growth is that you have to set really strong boundaries with yourself around enjoyment. I'm just going to say that again. You have to set really strong boundaries with yourself around enjoyment. What I mean by that is you have to learn when to step away. And this is really hard. This is coming from someone who I find this hard because it's a challenge. And most of the people that I work with, clients, also struggle with this. This is the thing of, like, this can be very difficult. And the people who, I don't think this really matters how much money you're making, because people who are making like 100 million, I don't work with people who are making 100 million, but people who are doing that on a yearly basis, I know of them, and I know of them. I don't have, let me just get this clear for you. I don't work with clients who are at the 100 million a year mark. However, I know what is going on in that space to some level. I'm not an expert in it, but I know what happens in most, like, I've had conversations where I understand what is happening there. And this comes up with other people I've had conversations with, and they're like, yeah, same thing, same issue, and in fact, it can be even worse. So it's addictive, right? Success is addictive, growth is addictive, there's constant journey that never ends, there's never an end point, you're never going to finish your to-do list. So trying to enjoy this whole process can be really hard, but you really need to set strong boundaries with yourself around enjoyment. You need to be like, right, this is what I'm doing, this is a non-negotiable, I'm taking this time off, or I'm doing this, or I'm spending money on this, or the business is going to pay for this, or I am not having a conversation in this arena because of X, Y, and Z thing, or I don't want to work with this person because of whatever. You have to set really strong boundaries. And that might be the clients you work with. If there's a client you don't like working with, get rid of them, because your happiness is worth more. And in business, we've got to find the tiny, tiny little things that make the happiness what it is. Because happiness in business is not necessarily the same as happiness outside of business, and making that happen for you can look like a whole plethora of different things and is so individual, right? Like one person's vision of what happiness is in business can look so vastly different to someone else, and someone else could be like, that's hell to me. So being really clear with yourself around enjoyment, and also making sure you have enjoyment outside of business, will help with the enjoyment inside of business. So try and, where possible, live your life and enjoy the people around you, and be, inspired by the things outside of life, because that really will influence you and help you enjoy this journey as kind of together as one life. It's a lifestyle at the end of the day. A lot of people as business owners, it's a lifestyle. It's a life you choose. But you have to then match the non-business lifestyle with it, as in you've got to learn to exist in two of them. And there's going to be times in your business where that's really hard because you're just head down working. But there's also times where you need to find that outside of business, and you need to be able to rely on other crutches to pull you through when the times are difficult in business. And creating happiness outside of that will really allow for you to learn how to enjoy being where you're at and accepting it, and accepting that this is me. This is where I am. This is me. This is not where I'm at forever. It's going to change. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, and I'm going to get there, and I'm not going to give up. And that is ultimately where this whole conversation comes down to. It's about acceptance. It's about owning where you are, and it's about living what is true to you, true to yourself, and true to what your dreams are and what you want to achieve. Because you can achieve whatever the hell you want to achieve in business. I really, really believe that. And I have a desktop wallpaper that has been on my wallpaper, I think, for the last year or something. And it's a really great one, so I don't change it. And is, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. You can do anything, but you can't do everything. And that is so true. So, so true. And it's true for where you're at right now. Your growth can change. The speed of growth can change. You can enjoy where you're at right now. You don't need to be embarrassed by it. You don't need to feel less than a human being because you haven't made £25 million in 2 years. It's irrelevant. You can enjoy where you are right now and be enough, because you are enough. And your business is enough. So on that note, I'm going to leave you. I hope you have a fantastic week. I hope this episode sits with you. I hope you think about it. Maybe you refer back to it. Maybe you really sit on some of the things we've discussed here. Thanks for sticking with me. I will see you next week. Take care. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Honest Business Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure that you are subscribed. And if you'd like to support the podcast, please share it with others and leave a rating and review. To catch up with all the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram @may.james_, where I share the raw, uncut, behind the scenes reality of what running multiple businesses every day truly looks like. As always, links and any resources that were mentioned in the episode will be in the show notes below. That's all for this episode, and I look forward to seeing you next time.